All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Free for All. This is your host, Big John. I'm flying solo tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Our usual co-host, Hody Johns, the Hode Man. You know, I get a text from him a couple hours earlier today, and he's like, "Oh man, I can't make the show tonight. I forgot I have a wedding to fly to in an entirely different state." So I don't know how you forget a flight and a wedding and remember it a couple hours before you're supposed to be at the airport. But Hody runs a busy life. So Hody, hopefully you'll enjoy yourself, and I'll try to carry the show as best I can. You're watching Free for All, Libertarian talk show tonight, right here on Distant Warrior. Feel free to find us on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Look for @Distant Warrior. It's the same name everywhere. And leave us a comment. Hit the subscribe button. We love to hear from everyone and help us grow by hitting those subscribe buttons, whatever platform you may be on. All right, everyone. Tonight we have two excellent guests, very much in the news this week, and we wanted to get them on, talk to them, get their thoughts about what's been going on this week. But in particular, I'm happy to have the new leadership for the Libertarian Party of Colorado, which held its convention this past weekend. And coming out of that, we have Mr. Keith Laube, the newly elected state chair for the LP Colorado, and Mr. Doug Jones, the vice chair, newly elected vice chair for the LPCO. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here on Free for All tonight. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for hosting.
Yeah. All right. So let's get right to it. The LPCO, I would say, has been one, probably, if I would say maybe the second most controversial state affiliate of the Libertarian Party, perhaps probably surpassed by LPNH. So now the former chair was Hannah Goodman, correct? Another person who was at James Wiley, was he the vice chair or was he the treasurer? I forget what was his role in LPCO formerly.
I think his latest role was secretary.
Secretary. Okay.
But he'd been the executive director for some time.
Okay.
And held a lot of the officer positions. Do you know Keith for sure?
Yeah, I think he started as executive director. He's never really elected. And then we had turnover on the board. There was a lot of turnover in the last 2 years on this board. And that's why we had so many officers up for election this convention. Typically only have half of them. We had 9 of the 11.
Wow. Okay.
Board positions were up for election. So it was a big convention in that regard.
Yeah. I saw that there was a lot of slate of new officers elected. So that was tumultuous. I don't think that's an inappropriate word for what happened. So for the folks watching, the reason we look at places like the recent LP Michigan state convention and the Colorado state convention, because of the internal party politics, call them caucus wars if you'd like, which saw, we had the Reno takeover in 2022, where the Mises Caucus kind of took over the reins of national and a lot of the state affiliates. And ever since former Chair McCardle resigned under cloudy circumstances that we've documented previously on this show, everyone's looking to these state conventions as sort of clues, trying to read the tea leaves of where the Libertarian Party, the Libertarian movement and political movement in this country is headed. I mentioned LP Michigan. I forgot to mention LP California. They had their convention and put in, elected in some new leadership. Now, LP Colorado was a very staunch Mises and McCardle ally. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that. So, Keith, let's start off with you. When you ran, under which kind of auspices did you run? What was your vision in running? What were you hoping to accomplish? And tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, I consider myself more of a moderate libertarian. I'm not in the Mises Caucus. Although it's more to the far right, and they don't really go anywhere in the left side of policies, is my understanding. And I ran because about a year and a half ago, in 2024, things just started unfolding here in Colorado. I mean, it really started at the National Convention when we had former President Trump at that time and
Right.
Kennedy come to the National Convention, and then in July, the Colorado board, wanted to put Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the ballot in Colorado and not have Chase Oliver on the ballot.
Right.
And I'm a busy person. I'm doing my thing. I've been a state chair before, and sort of been active in the party, but not real active last several years. And when that happened, that raised some flags that something's really goofy in this party. And then come fall, I got on the bylaws committee, and the proposal was to take 11 board members to 4, get rid of the judicial committee, get rid of the audit committee, and then that group of 4 board members could. It was worded a little bit crafty, but it's like, well, if member's not really following correct policy, we could just oust them out of the party. And so that was writing on the wall that something bad was going to happen if those bylaws passed. Basically, 3 people would control the party and could oust anybody they wanted to. And so we had state convention planned in end of May, which was posted on the website. So we started getting people together and said, we got to get to the convention. And in Colorado, you have to be 90 days before the convention, you have to be registered libertarian in Colorado. Plus, you have to donate at least $25 to the party, so you're a voting delegate at the convention. So we started rallying troops, and I can go through the whole scenario. I guess we had several conventions actually in 25. I don't know how many. We had a record number of conventions actually. The first one, they didn't do the 45 days. You're supposed to do a postcard notification to all members, and they didn't do that. And then about May 1st, we get an email saying, the venue canceled on us. Well, we knew the convention wasn't going to happen because they didn't do the notification. So they rescheduled to end of June. And that was going to be in a smaller town. The first one was near Denver. The second one was going to be in Holyoke, which is way in the far northeast corner of Colorado, a town of about 2,000 people. And that was sort of odd because it's not centrally located. Now, of course, I live in Southwest Colorado, so it's like an 8-hour drive. I mean, I could live in lots of other states. I mean, I could live in Iowa and still get to the convention faster because I have to go over several mountain passes, and mountain roads are not straight. It's slow travel. So they did the postcards for June. Everything it's going to happen. We had our troops rallied, and then the week of the convention, we get an email saying, we didn't do the 15-day notification in the newspaper, which is required by state law if you're electing officers. Right. So we thought about that, and it stayed on the website actually until Friday, the day before the convention, that the convention was happening. So we thought, well, I don't know what would have happened, but we thought, well, they're going to show up and say the chair can't cancel the convention. They'll pass those nasty bylaws. And then the officers will be elected some other time, but by then you only have 4 officers, and there's no judicial committee, no audit committee. And so we showed up, like 20, 28, 29 of us showed up, and they said, well, the meetings it's not happening. Well, we said, well, we're here, we're going to have a convention. And so the delegates there, passed some bylaws. We didn't vote officers, but then we continued that convention, did a continuation to August. And so in August, we ended up electing some board members. But early July, they had scheduled another convention to October 18th. And so in the meantime, we're thinking, well, do we do the August convention? And well, what if they cancel October convention? Then where are we at? Then there's still, then there's no changeover in officer. So we end up having this August convention, elected officers. I wrote a nice letter to the Secretary of State explaining this is a situation. We don't know if the October convention is going to happen. They canceled 2 already. This is what we did. And then, it happened in October, actually. So that's this past Saturday. So about 102 delegates showed up, and voting happened, and new people got voted in.
Yeah, and it's funny because as Coloradoans, how are citizens of Colorado referred to?
Coloradoans.
Coloradoans.
You gotta say it faster. That doesn't come out right.
Right. So as a non-Coloradoan, we had heard about these, I don't know, shall we call them convention shenanigans around scheduling, notification, and things of that nature. Our friend Karen Ann Harlow's was, involved with some of those, and there was videos taken and everything. And there was this sort of, I don't know, would you call it a conspiracy theory that this was being done on purpose to prevent the current leadership from being voted out of office? So like from what you just described, does that sound like a reasonable description of what was going on?
It's really hard to tell motivations and what's behind things. And so I wouldn't necessarily go there that they're trying to extend the convention or even eliminate the 2025 convention. It seemed like that was very possible. That's why we moved forward to do something and hold a convention and kind of elect backup officers and such. So, I don't know if it was a conspiracy or not, but they are well organized and they seem to be well coached.
Right.
I don't even know who's coaching them, but they seem to be well coached on tricks. I'll say tricks, but procedures.
Parliamentary procedures.
Yes.
Yeah, parliamentary procedures. Yeah.
I mean, we're in politics. Politics is a dirty business, and
sure.
My take's a little different. I mean, they did a convention in 24. We had one convention, one day. It happened. Everything was done perfectly. So it wasn't like it was their first time doing this, but things happen, and I guess the end of the day is whether it was trickery or just incompetence. Either way, you shouldn't be a leader, and the members decided that.
Right, and it's we can discuss a little more about it, but Doug, when would you say that the election of so before I get there, let me ask you this: are all the newly elected officers? Is there a mix of Mises, non-Mises aligned? Is it basically a repudiation of Mises in terms of the Colorado board at this point? Would you say?
Well, two people were elected who were not maybe from the traditional libertarian camp, but they really came across well at the convention. Mark Nielsen for membership chair or membership director, and Allison Spink as treasurer, and they sounded really good. Allison Spink, I believe, left the party, or she was the former treasurer, and when the RFK debacle happened, and he was made our candidate, or they attempted to make him our candidate in Colorado, then she left at that point. So I think she's probably maybe more friendly toward the traditional libertarians. I don't know for sure. We haven't had a lot of interaction yet.
Right, and this is all relatively fresh, right? Just having had the convention this past weekend, right? Keith, what do you think? Do you think that Colorado represents what appears to be a continuing shift away at the state affiliate level, away from the harder right wing, traditional, say, former Michael Heiss, Angela McArdle strain of the Mises Caucus?
I believe that is true. I mean, our convention on Saturday, the numbers sort of showed that a lot of the candidates, or a lot of the board positions, there was no one person running, and that was it. So it wasn't like they were highly contested, and maybe they saw the writing on the wall and nobody wanted to put their name up. And I mean, there's Mises that are way far right, and some, there's a wide strand of where their beliefs fall. Unfortunately, I think what happens in this situation, and maybe at national too, you end up with some aggressive leaders that end up doing some really bad things, and that's unfortunate. And so I don't want to lump everybody, that's in the Mises caucus, where they're all evil and play dirty tricks. They're sort of following their leadership, and they don't know what's going on sometimes, or all the reasons why things are being done. And the week before the convention, we got a lawsuit filed against us, and so we ended up in court on Friday afternoon, and that was probably a good thing, because then the judge basically let us set some rules about how the convention was going to run, because we still had, they didn't trust us, we didn't trust them, and so that was an opportunity, sort of like being at recess and there's two groups of students that want to play kickball or basketball, and there's only one ball. Well, somebody has to referee it. So the judge was sort of referee, and we got some things written down about what a fair convention is, how delegations, or how the delegates were going to be credentialed, and that was a good thing. That way, both sides went into the convention knowing, okay, this is going to be straight up fair, and the cards fall where they fall, and we, that's fine with me.
Now, in terms of this lawsuit, because I wasn't aware of this, who sued whom? What was it about exactly?
Yeah, so the couple of the board members, the previous board members, were afraid, since we had this convention in August, they feared that we would show up at the convention and say, well, we're the board, we're running the convention, or the convention already happened, there's no convention. And that's probably a legitimate concern, although, about a month before the convention, I wrote a letter saying, well, disputing that was going to happen. Then, of course, Doug and I proposed some bylaw changes too, but, that could be trickery too. If you're on the other side, well, they're playing a trick. Sounds like they're going to come and participate in the convention. They're going to come and say, well, we're the officers, there's no convention. But, you could, it's third grade on the playground,
Right.
It was time to, the recess was over, and we got back in the classroom and let the delegates decide what happened. And end of the day, I think the membership is served correctly. Out of 11 board members, we elected 9 new ones. The two will be, their terms are up in the spring. And like Doug said, 2 of them were not really in our so-called group, but I think both of them are good people, and they're going to be fun to work with. I don't see any issues.
Yeah, Doug, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think we'll have a good working relationship. Some of it remains to be seen, but and there may be some ill will too, at least especially from maybe the ones who did not go up for election this time. I don't know though. I hate to expect the worst, but I was critical. I was more critical than Keith was of the current group, and so people might not like me very much, but I hope we can work with them. Just go forward. We need to grow this party. We need to build confidence from the membership that it's going to be run professionally. And the former group, they were pretty vocal on Twitter and abrasive and as Keith has said before, vulgar. And a new professional look is going to be great for everybody, I think. And focus on growth, grow the party.
So that was going to be my next question. So aside from the nature of social media posts and whatnot, because when I said initially that they're probably the second most controversial state affiliate, a lot of that is wrapped up into their social media messaging and the tone they take and the aggressive, combative stance they take, but not in a good way, not in a like my political philosophy is better than yours, but just a lot of times it being down and dirty in a lot of, and I think Keith, your description of recess on the third grade playground is kind of appropriate when you're dealing in that sort of world, right? So between the two of you, how do you see LPCO trying to change its messaging? What are you guys going to? I mean, you mentioned growing the membership, growing the party. What's your plan? What's your roadmap for something like that? And let me ask you something I asked Nikayla on the national level, which is what metrics are you going to use to show that you're actually achieving your goals?
Yeah. So yeah, we got some catch-up work or repair work, whatever you want to, to do. And even before Mises Caucus ever existed, you go to Libertarian Convention, you always had people that were different versions of libertarianism, and sometimes you get the question or 5 questions or how long it took before I don't think you're libertarian because you don't agree with that, and we're famous for trying to find out how our differences are. And sometimes we dwell that way too much. And so I've always focused on, if you're 55% libertarian, that's good. Let's find that 55% and take that and do something with it. And the other things will, either you never, come to a conclusion that the libertarians are right, or it's not part of your life, maybe, that's okay. We're not going to have 100%. Everybody in the party is not going to be 100% libertarian, and that's okay.
Right. Well, what's that old joke? Welcome to the Libertarian Party. Now be prepared to make a mortal enemy out of someone you agree with 95% of the time. It's like, you're right. That's always like any group of libertarians. There's always one guy who's not really a libertarian, right? So go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the way I look at it, we have Mises Caucus people in our party, and a lot of them have been good donors, and they're good people. They have skill sets, and if they're willing to work with the current board, the board's going to change. I'm not going to be on the board forever, and so we just have to start building the foundation of what can we do together. And you talk about the metrics. The metrics typically I use as the registered libertarian, and so in Colorado we were up to about 51,000 registered libertarians in 2021, and now we're down to about 42,000. So in the last 2 years, we've lost about 15% or over 7,000. And some of this, Colorado's one of those states that likes to put things on the ballot for the citizens to vote on. So we have a lot of propositions and constitutional amendments and referendums. And so in 2016, they always pick a presidential year because you have all kinds of people show up to vote. But they put on the ballot before 2016. We were sort of a closed primary. So if I wanted to vote in the Republican primary, I had to be a registered Republican. Democrat primary, I had to be a registered Democrat. So in 2016, Proposition 108 went before the people, and it was that if you're unaffiliated, you can decide which major party primary you can vote in. And so that was in 2016. So 2018, really, 2018, 2020, that started, people realized, I'm a Democrat and live a really heavily Republican area. I should switch unaffiliated so I can vote in the Republican primary to get more of a moderate Republican, and vice versa. I mean, the Republicans, Democrats, it works both ways. So what's happened is, most states you have about a third Republican, third Democrat, third independent or unaffiliated. We had a little bit more unaffiliated, but over the last 6-7 years, unaffiliates have grown to 51% of the registered voters.
Wow.
So the Democrats and Republicans both lost 6-7% of their base, and they might still be base, but they're registered unaffiliated, and that affected us a little bit. But then with the the vulgar social media posts, we seem to really lose a lot of people in the last year and a half. And so that makes it hard for minor parties, third parties, we're going to call them, in Colorado, because I can't vote in a primary unless I change to unaffiliated. And so I don't know. It's going to be tough because I live in a heavily Republican area. There's no Democrat on the ticket most of the time. So the election happens in the Republican primary. So everybody in my county should be registered and affiliated or Republican. Otherwise, you don't really have a vote. And so that's something we have to work through, or we have to change, the way Colorado law is right now. But our hope is in the next year or two, we'll get back to 51,000 registered libertarians. I think a lot of them will come back. I think a lot of them just gave up after the RFK, and then just all the chaos last summer of 2024. We just have to reach out. And then there's always new people we can reach out. But in the history of our parties, we've always gained membership until about COVID. And so to lose our numbers, and even percent of voters, it's even worse because Colorado's been a growing state. So we should actually be growing. So we've been repelling more people than we've been attracting, because people are joining our party. People are coming in, but people are leaving faster.
Oh yeah. When I was looking at the number of donors, donors, and normally during a presidential election year, there's a lot of excitement, and the donor numbers go way up by 37% on average over the last few election cycles during the presidential election year. But last year, 2024, we lost 34%. So we're at about half where we would be if we had supported the presidential candidate. I know maybe he wasn't popular. I don't know. It really doesn't matter. If you support the candidate and get excitement going around the candidate, then it helps the party. The party makes a lot more money and gets a lot more people. And we're about half what we should be if we'd have supported Chase Oliver.
And that, to me, and to a lot of other people who've been around, was very strange. It wasn't that, okay, every libertarian has an obligation to vote for Chase Oliver and Mike Termott. That wasn't, even though I found them to be perfectly acceptable candidates. It was more that certain state affiliates, Colorado being the most prominent one, that said, we don't want these guys on the state ballot, which, to my reading of the national bylaws to which the state affiliates have signed on to, that's not permissible, right?
No.
You have a candidate, he should be on the ballot, he or she should be on the ballot. And then threatening to essentially auction that ballot access off to RFK made it even worse, because it's not even a matter of Oliver, Termott, or nothing, which I think is, if I'm not mistaken, that's the LPNH route. They just decided to put nobody on. But the act of putting on RFK and Shanahan was explicitly against the bylaws, which said you can't have another party's candidate if you haven't, if the delegates selected somebody. Now, the picture that was being painted by Colorado leadership in association with McCardle and Heisen and the national Mises folks was, hey, they were doing this on principle. You know, Colorado is allowed to do that. Libertarians don't tell, you know, we don't have edicts telling people how to run their local politics. Was that the case? Or, like, how did the rank and file of the LPCO feel about that? I mean, as outsiders to Colorado, we hear different stories, but how was it, like, within the state, within the party? Was there support for not putting Oliver and Termott on the ticket? Or, I mean, bylaws aside, what was the sentiment?
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, they pretty much it came from the state board. Chase Oliver's not a candidate we like. We never supported him. He came to the 2024 convention, our Colorado convention, and Doug and I worked his table and a few other people, but it was amazing. Nobody came to the table. I mean, the convention of 45 delegates, whoever was there that day, they just ignored us. I thought that was really weird. Because I hadn't been to convention since COVID. And so that was, we got straight from the top. And, you know, of course, I sent emails to the board saying, well, how can a handful of, libertarians decide how 50,000 or 40-some thousand libertarians who they can vote for? I mean, this is going to come back. I mean, if every board did that, well, then why even have a national convention? I mean, if every state can just pick who they want out of the willy-nilly, why have a national convention? And so I don't know. I think a lot of the membership drop really did increase after that. So I think a lot of members spoke that way, and we didn't have any get-togethers or any conventions. So I didn't talk to a lot of people. I know a lot of people did call and email the board saying what's going on, this was wrong, and they didn't listen to the membership. They listened with the members that were telling them, yeah, we don't like Chase Oliver. And there was some that did think he was a fit candidate. I didn't see anything wrong with him. He did a lot of work up front before the national convention. I thought that's what we want in a candidate.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you, by the way. I mean, with very few exception, I thought the entire slate this past presidential cycle was actually very capable. I could have gone with Oliver Termod, Lars, basically any of the major ones. I thought would have made a fine candidate. Doug, you were going to say something. What was your thoughts on that?
Well, when I met Keith at the 2024 state convention, it was really odd how people kind of stayed away from our table. The fix was in. They were so well organized. You have to give them credit. They're very well organized. And then we had a presidential candidate debate. And I thought Chase knocked it out of the park. He was just the best communicator of libertarian ideas up there by far. And some of the others looked, frankly, I don't know, inebriated. And he just knocked it out of the park. But, the applause was very controlled by about half the group, and they awarded the the winner of the debate, it was really oddly not. I don't think Chase won that. I'm not sure.
I don't think he did either. And really, not to cut you off, Doug, but that convention hadn't been one since probably 2019, and so 2024 I show up in, and there was probably only a handful of libertarians that I recognized, and so I'd say our base supporters gave up. I mean, they didn't show up. I don't know if they gave up. They didn't show up because they weren't in power, and there wasn't. There were some board elections, but I sat there. I was like, well, I don't know I didn't really know what was going on because I didn't know who was who because there's all these new people, which was good, but then they were all sort of working together, and I think a lot of our people, the old-time libertarians, I don't know what you're going to call them, traditional libertarians, in 2022 had come and they sort of got routed, and they just had a sour taste in their mouth, and they just didn't want to come back to convention and see that again, and so basically, after 2024, I mean, Doug and I talked, like, well, wonder what's going to happen, and then 25, we said we got to rally people because there's a lot of people in the party that have been active over the last 20 years, and they all came back. And we just get them on the phone, and they said, we got people, we need everybody we can, and most of them came. Some of them did not. They have things going on Saturdays, and then the lawsuit I think scared away some people because they just didn't want to get involved in a controversial thing. Right. But we had the numbers, and we used to have like 100, 150 people at our conventions, and I went in 24 presidential year, and there was like 45 or 48 delegates. That was really small.
Yeah. Yeah, and I made the mistake that a lot of people made. When the National Party announced that Donald Trump and RFK Jr. were going to be speaking at the National Convention, I said, that's not a libertarian party. I don't want anything to do with this. And I quit the party for temporarily. I quit the party, and then I thought about it and realized that's exactly what they want. That's exactly what they're trying to do, purge the Libertarian Party of traditional libertarians. And so that's when I got back in and started getting active and looking for these other people, and we kind of found each other, I guess. And Keith, thank goodness, decided to run for chair. And this new group, the new board members, holy smokes, Keith is a former chair of the Iowa LP. I'm former chair of the Utah LP. And there's a two-time chair of the Colorado LP, Jeff Orrick, who's the new secretary. And there's one other, Betty Rose is a former chair. So there's a bunch of former chairs in this leadership group. And you wouldn't believe how excited and well organized. We know what we're supposed to be doing, right? And so we're getting in now and digging in and figuring out what our plans are. And they're in 4 days after the convention.
Wow. Yeah. That's like, I didn't realize there were all these former chairs from other state affiliates. Did you guys plan on being in Colorado at the same time? It seems like, an alignment of the stars or something. But so for the folks who are libertarians in Colorado, and for those of us that are looking at national trends as well, what can we expect out of the LPCO in terms of its messaging? What are some issues that you guys really believe in and pushing? And there's the political, like you said, let's grow the base, let's grow the donor class, right? Fill up our coffers a little bit, all good stuff. Like in terms of local libertarians elected, how does Colorado typically fare? I'm a New Yorker, right? It's easier to get on the ballot in Moscow than it is to get in New York at this point if you're a libertarian, and that's no exaggeration, right?
Yeah.
So the number of elected libertarians in New York State from a high when Larry Sharp was running for governor. I mean, he's running again in 26, but we've seen a precipitous decline because everything's a write-in ballot. I assume Colorado's not that bad off. Typically, like, do you guys have success? Educate me a little bit. Do you have success getting local candidates elected, and or did that drop off under Goodman? Or are you guys going to focus on that? How does that work in terms of what you guys see as the roadmap, say for the next year or so for LPCO?
As far as ballot access, Colorado is really easy. We have a convention. We just put our candidates. We nominate a convention. It's not like Iowa. We had a petition. We had to get so many petitions. It wasn't notoriously bad, but then of course that changes. The more success we have, those numbers go up. But Colorado's really easy. So we've run a lot of candidates over the last several decades. I mean, I was in part of the party back in 2007, 2008. I joined, and before I moved to Iowa. So I have some historic references here, but we always ran a good slate of candidates. A lot of times, we get a handful of candidates elected. It's lower. It's local government offices. I think we definitely need to do that more. One of my things I see often in libertarians is I'm running for U.S. Senate. It's like I meet somebody and they're excited. And well, what's your experience? I mean, have you done anything? Have you been president of your HOA, president of a nonprofit? Have you been on school board? Have you? It's like, no. It's like, oh, now you're going to be U.S. Senator? And you have no leadership skills. So really the training ground is to get people at, town council, city council, school board. School board gets a little, chaotic because parents are real excited about children's education. But those are the training grounds for libertarians. And if we want to have good state and, people in the state legislature that are good at campaigning and coordinating and speaking, we need to have those start at the local level and work their way up. And so that's what I'm going to, we haven't sat down with the campaigns chair yet, but or our director, but that's one thing we really need to focus on, and we just need to find candidates. But yeah, you're right, it really did drop off the last couple of years, the number of candidates with the last regime. It seemed like we just didn't have that big of a slate of candidates.
Now, was I'm sorry to interrupt, but was that because there weren't enough candidates being recruited, or was it like? And listen, I'm a bit cynical, right? I just saw something from McCardle today, who, for those that are unaware, Angela McCardle is now leading the Mises Caucus. She took over for Michael Heiss. She literally put out her 10-point, I call it a cult roadmap. Literally saying we're going to recruit people who are going to try to run and then drop out and give it to the Republican and throw their support to the Republican candidate. That's her. She's not even trying to hide it. It's like, here's our plan and try to stop me now. This is what I plan on doing. So when you say there were fewer candidates, was it a lack of qualified candidates that were recruited to run for the LP Colorado, or was it the prior regime saying, hey, as soon as you get a couple of percentage points, we're going to try to cut a deal with the Republican Party and get the Republican elected, or get the RFK guy elected, or whatever? Or was it a little bit of both, if you guys know the answer to that?
Well, they spent a lot of their time and effort focusing on what they call the Liberty Pledge. And that's where they made a list of things, libertarian votes. We want you to vote this way. And they farmed that out to the Republicans and said, hey, will you sign the pledge? If you sign the pledge, then what? There's an implication that we'll support you and we won't run against you. I don't know if that was ever written down,
Right.
but they were really working hard on this pledge program, basically to get Republicans to be more libertarian and fewer libertarians to run, actually. And I was very critical of that, because the members of this party are the people who registered to vote Libertarian. You know, they could have registered R or D or unaffiliated or anything else, but no, they chose the Libertarian team. And I keep using the football analogy. It's like they're fans. They're like fans of the Broncos are like that, right? And they want to see the party do well. They want to see us run candidates. They don't want to see us going over to the other side and say, hey, vote for this Republican, right? I think that was really a breach of fiduciary duty by the leadership. And I've been very critical of that, and I would never support anything like that myself. So we need to, I think, focus on the people who are members of the party. If you're an officer of a organization, you should be focused on the members of your organization, right? And trying to make them proud of what you're doing and the team that they joined.
Yeah. Well, and even what you've said, I'm in 100% agreement with, by the way. I mean, you're right. From the moment that particular flavor of the McArdle Heist gang took over, like from day one, I said, no, these are Republicans, right? And it wasn't the usual, you're not a real libertarian coming, right?
Yeah.
It was just like, if you've been around long enough, you've got enough gray hair on your head, you've seen this before. And you kind of spot it, but even more so than that is just the historical evidence that this never works for the minority party that's cutting the deals. It never works. It only works for that one little, like I said, okay, even if we give McArdle all the credit in the world for convincing Donald Trump to pardon Ross Ulbricht, what else has been going on, right? Like, and give me your thoughts on this. I mean, we're killing people in international water without adjudication, without a declaration of war. We're just going on somebody say so. And I watched the president of the United States today in the press conference say, I don't need to ask for a declaration of war. I'm just going to kill everyone I see in a boat. I'm going to have my dry drunk of a secretary of war here just drop ordnance on any boat that I see. And trust me when I tell you, these guys are invaders, right?
Yeah.
And now you go back and think, well, what was the horse deal here? As a libertarian, if you bought into this strategy, what was the deal? That are you still in on this deal? Are you still in on selling out or cutting deals, if I'm being generous, with the Republican Party?
Yeah.
Is that where you want to go forward? I don't know. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah. So just for viewers, Colorado's the Democrat Party controls the House and Senate in our state, and so the Republicans are sort of a minor party at this point. So they're trying to get leverage, and they're trying to, there's been some. Initially, how this started was there's some close races for these House seats that a Libertarian candidate, got spread. The difference was, they gained the difference.
They beat the spread. Yeah.
They met the spread, and I know we used to brag about that. And I go that that's just going to bite us someday because they don't want to know that. And to me, those people that vote Libertarian, half of them would not even vote. A fourth would vote for Democrat, a fourth vote for Republican, and whether we beat the spread or not, it didn't matter. And there's 30% of the people don't even vote. So if the R or D wanted to get the votes, go out there and excite some voters that don't vote, and you'd have won the election. So that's how it sort of started. And the Democrats are in control in Colorado, and they are far liberal. It used to be the Libertarians we were super conservative, not spin a dime, and we were super liberal. We're on the outsides. And nationwide, the Republicans are doing stuff that I don't think Libertarians would even do if we were
Right.
there. And in Colorado, the Democrats are passing stuff. Oh my gosh, it's like, this is crazy. And so I think what's happened last, I don't know, 4 to 6 years is the Libertarians are actually maybe in the middle rather than on the outsides of policies. And so we're more moderately liberal, moderately conservative compared to the DNR, which is really weird. But and so I sort of see where the Republicans and definitely these Democrats are way out of control, because they are. They're and Colorado's a weird state. I mean, most of the people live in Denver in the Front Range, so it's very consolidated. So 90% of the people live in 10% of the area. I mean, my congressional district is like 3/4 of the state.
In terms of, you mean population,
or the congressional districts are all the same population, but my district is 3/4 of the landmass.
Okay.
Because it's all rural and small towns.
Gotcha.
And so to make this congressional district, that's how they drew the boundaries. And so we have a lot of, and other states are that way too. Sometimes you have a big metropolitan area.
Sure.
And then, Chicago sort of rules the whole state of Illinois, and, other Minneapolis, Minnesota, the same way. So here in Colorado, that sort of is, really the Metro Denver area controls the state house and state senate. And they have totally different beliefs than the rest of Colorado. And so there's a lot of interesting things going on. But I find it, I think nationwide, we're going to actually be maybe the same party, which we were always the 10-foil hats or whatever. But I think the tide has turned where the major parties are really, the old parties are really just going, I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a great point that I'd love to get your opinion on. Like, clearly, the Republicans and the Democrats are being dominated by their extreme wings, right? So the Democrats are being ruled by the AOC class and the Ilhan Omar class, and the Gavin Newsoms that are all the way on the left, right? The Republican Party is so far right that they've become Marxist at this point, in my opinion, right? They've come all the way around when you have the MAGAs, the Trumps, I challenge conservatives who grew up in the Reagan era or the Jack Kemp economy wonks who are like, when did we decide that tariffs are good? When did we decide that price fixing in Washington is good, right? Libertarians have always been against that nonsense, right? But it used to be that you could count on Republicans to at least agree with you on free markets. And you can't do that anymore, right? They've gone so far around. You might literally, they have more in common with Bernie Sanders than they care to admit. So do you guys see the microcosm of what's happening with the Libertarian Party? Like, we always say this, right? But filling that void, because we kind of see it on the Republican stage where the only Republicans who are really attacked hard by the Trump administration are guys like Thomas Massie or guys like Rand Paul, who are, for politicians, remarkably consistent in their positions, right? Where sometimes they'll support Trump and a lot of times they don't when he goes off the rails on things like the economy or civil liberties or something like that. Do you see an opportunity, not both within Colorado and nationally, for libertarians to actually try to, like you said, on some weird way, where it appears, whereas before we were the radical party, now we might be the moderate party, just because everyone else is being steered by their very loud, very vocal, extreme caucuses and wings.
Yeah, and the problem with when there are two extremes, the problem is that all they have to do is point to the other guys and go, "Oh, look how extreme they are.
Right.
We're the alternative." And then the same happens the other direction, and it does tend to kind of solidify their own basis, I think. But if we do our job, so you just can't get from 2% to 20% directly. You have to go through 3% and 4%. So I think we have to modify our message, make sure it's clean and understandable and forward thinking, and not all negative. I mean, we can point to the other parties all day, and yeah, it's true, right? But I think we have to come up with a positive program, and we haven't really talked about that yet here in Colorado. But a positive program for all of Colorado that will just be a lot more palatable than what we see from the two extremes.
Yeah, I see. There's blue districts and red districts, and that's sort of, it's gerrymandering or whatever. But it's just how neighborhoods get set up. And I saw this in Iowa too. There's red districts of the state and blue districts. And if you're in a blue district, there's one candidate. Well, there's no Republican candidate because they don't want to waste the time running a candidate because they don't want to put resources there. And
Right.
both parties do that. So there's a lot of races. This is at the state level or state legislative level that there's not much choice for the people. And so I think as libertarians, we did this in Iowa. We found quality people to run. And like Doug was saying, when I started the party in 2011, we'd get 2 or 3%. Well, easy one is a two-way race. We'd only get maybe 10% or 15. And then we moved it to 20, 25, 30 to 35. And once you start getting above 35 or 40, well, you could win a race maybe.
Right.
And it was really, people were comfortable. They weren't the party that was on the ticket. They all vote Libertarian. I'm comfortable with that candidate, and I'm comfortable with the party. And I hate the other party so bad. Before, people just wouldn't vote, and now they were comfortable voting Libertarian. And that's what we have to do in Colorado and maybe other states, is find those two-way rate. Well, we're in a two-way race against a D or an R, and have a good, solid candidate, and people get comfortable voting Libertarian because most people have never voted Libertarian before, and that's an easy way to do it. And I end up with a attorney general. And our candidate got like 245,000 votes or something, 250,000. It's an incredible amount because no candidate ever got more than like 60,000 before that. And for whatever reason, the other party didn't want to run a candidate. And that's more common because they can't find candidates either because the Republicans are all over 70. So, I mean, they're all old.
Hey.
Maybe not.
I was going to say, I don't know why I'm chuckling at that. I'm getting there myself.
You go to the county level, it's all retirees. I mean,
right.
They don't have the energy of young people active because they have to be in either of those parties. You got to put your time in to move up. They just don't let some young 30-year-old. Oh, we're gonna, They have a structure, and that's why they don't get taken over by a Mises caucus, because you have to be there for 20 years before you get any power.
Well, also, you mentioned Colorado law says you have to be registered, was it 90 days before convention, before you can become a delegate? Was it 90 days?
Yeah, their bylaws, yeah.
Yeah, the bylaws, 90 days.
Yeah.
Like here in New York, I think the Libertarian Party says you could pay your dues and show up the same day and be considered.
Yeah.
It's like that's how Howard Stern became the Libertarian candidate for governor in the 80s, right? He just had all his fans show up in Albany one day.
Yeah.
What would you say if you guys were to focus on messaging for the citizens of Colorado? What one or two issues do you think are ripe for libertarian messaging that would appeal, that might be winners for you guys in Colorado?
Well, we haven't talked about this, but
I didn't mean to put you guys on the spot.
Keith and I are both in very Republican areas, conservative areas. And so in those areas, I think the biggest issue is we have a taxpayers Bill of Rights here that was passed a couple of decades ago, I guess. And that requires certain, you have to go through a lot of steps to actually raise taxes. And then if there's excess income, excess revenue, that has to be returned to the voters. It's a really nice thing, fairly libertarian thing to do, right?
Yeah.
In fact, we had a couple of libertarians working on that at the time. So defending that against attacks by the legislature to steal that money, and they have to go through hoops big hoops to steal that money. And he
You mean steal it a second? You mean steal it a second time?
Right, exactly,
Gotcha.
exactly. And because they stole too much, and then they need to make an excuse to steal the rest that they didn't need, right?
Right.
So I think Tabor, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, is going to be a big issue forever in conservative areas. I don't know so much about Democrat areas, though. There are, well,
I mean,
I
is
don't know.
there an ICE presence in Colorado? Is that something that Democrats might get riled up about? I don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, like it's one of those things that conceptually, I don't think of Colorado or any of the central states being hotbeds of immigration issues, but apparently ICE has jurisdiction just about everywhere, right? So,
yeah, there's a lot in actually the Midwest states too, because you have a lot of agricultural businesses, whether it's food processing, and those are the low, hard jobs, and immigrants take those.
Right.
In Colorado, it's the same thing, whether it's working in the fields, harvesting sweet corn, or in the meat processing. So yeah, ICE is probably that's one that the Democrats are fighting. I mean, our governor has been, there's battles going on about that, but I think, strategy wise, to me, it's always just be very professional and look like you're having fun, and people want to join, people that are, know what they're doing and going somewhere. And that's the message we have to put out. There's going to be, some issues we have to talk through some of those and see what our points are. And really, I like to, when we have candidates, let them sort of decide what's right for them. But this Taxpayer Bill of Rights that was passed decades ago, it's set by population and inflation, so government can only grow so much a year. And then if they bring in more revenues, then it goes back to the taxpayers. And that was really great. I was young. I was getting refunds. It was great. But over time, whether it's the DRRs, we want to spend more money, so they find out how to tax. But basically raise taxes, but there's loopholes they find through this. Well, we're going to charge a fee for use of this, or some user fees and stuff. So they, over the years, they massage that, and there's been several of these referendums go to voters. And of course, it's always, we're going to soak the rich, or tax the rich, and it doesn't happen that way. And
well, it's right along the lines. I was watching Besant at a press conference yesterday, and someone asked him, like, well, tariffs are taxes, right? He goes, no, they're not. They're surcharges. Would you call a surcharge a tax? And I'm sitting there at the TV nodding my head. Yes, I would. I would call that a tax,
Yeah.
But, I understand what you mean, though. You'll always find some other way of taxing. It's just part of the game, I guess. Moving on to messaging, I assume you guys are going to move to a more positive messaging instead of negative, and instead of tearing other people down, other candidates, other parties down, you're just going to try to be positive about the messaging and what libertarianism can bring to the table, and how the philosophy works.
Absolutely. That's exactly the way we're going to go, and we're going to be professional. Everybody agrees with that on the board, at least the new board. So we have to go that way. I wouldn't want to be a part of it if we were attacking people because of their age, or their whatever, their sexual preference, no, that's unlibertarian. That's repugnant.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm glad to hear that you guys have this vision. You seem obviously details to be worked out. You've only been in office for 3-4 days. I get it, and I apologize if I put you on the spot unnecessarily, but I just like hearing how people formulate their plans, and how people can get together and put forth into action what their vision is. So and the first step of that is obviously articulating the vision, knowing what it is you want to accomplish. All right, everyone. This has been Free for All. Before we go, Keith, Doug, please promote whatever it is you want to promote. Where can people go if they want to contribute to LPCO? How can they help you? Please give out your websites, X handles, whatever you have to promote.
Well, you can go to our website, Libertarian Party of Colorado website. We're still getting things set up, and there's trying to get things the way we like it. So, but yeah, I think if you're in other states, support your local states, and get involved. My message would be, go to your state convention, talk to your leaders. I mean, as leaders, we love when our constituents actually call and say, "Hey, I'd like to meet you. I'd like to, help out if you're doing an event or something."
Yeah.
Right.
Doug?
Go to lpcolorado.org and help us out a little bit. That'd be fantastic. But I think more importantly, don't be dumb like I was. Don't quit the party. Don't step out. Instead, that's what they want. Instead, step in, get involved, and make it personal commitment, a lifelong commitment, if you will. That's what I did, and I think that's the way to go. It takes some of the pressure off of the Armageddon feeling like it's all going to end tomorrow. Oh no.
Right.
If you are already committed in your heart to go libertarian for the long term, then what happens tomorrow or today or yesterday doesn't matter so much as your commitment. And if you lose, it's the same thing. You're still going to work the next day, fighting for the libertarian cause.
Excellent. I love the way you put that. I always say, whether or not you see libertarians in office, try to live every day as a libertarian. That's the best thing you could do, and just live your beliefs that way. All right, everyone. We've had a great show tonight. We've had Keith Laube and Doug Jones of the Libertarian Party of Colorado, newly elected officers of the Libertarian Party of Colorado. Please, if you've enjoyed the show, want to see more episodes like this, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, whatever platform you're on, YouTube, X, or Facebook. We really appreciate it. Help us grow. Hey, check out the Libertarian Party of Colorado website. Help these guys out there. They're working hard to bring libertarianism to Colorado. And until next time, when 10 p.m. every Thursday night, when the Hode Man will be back, this has been Big John. Peace, everyone.